Good morning, Abundant Life Church. This is Pastor Chris, and we're continuing our study of Romans chapter 1, verses 8 down through 17. And we're looking at specifically verse 17, where Paul says that God's righteousness is revealed from first to last. All right, what does that first to last phrase mean exactly? And why is it important? Well, you might think, is it important? Does it have to mean something? Maybe it's just this empty, like poetic filler. It doesn't really mean anything at all. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to lectures or read textbooks, and you have to kind of skim because it's a whole lot of blah, 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 blah. Okay, there's the important stuff. So most of that you can just ignore. Is this one of those things that we can probably say, don't worry about it, just move on? I have a confession to make to you. When I'm doing my daily quiet time, I read through a couple chapters of the Old Testament, a couple of the New Testament every day. When I'm in the book of Deuteronomy, I skip most of that stuff because I don't care what you're supposed to do if you have a skin rash. I skip it. Is this something we can just skip? No, it's here for a reason. And I think we're going to find out as we continue the study, it's there for a fairly important reason. If we can find out what that reason is and why this idea from first to last really does matter, it's going to tell us something about our faith that unfortunately often does get overlooked or misunderstood when it shouldn't be. We actually need to know what Paul means by from first to last. Now, to discover that, we need to go back and we need to do what I didn't do in the last study. We need to look at the whole context to find out what was going on, what Paul meant. And we need to ask ourselves, what was the situation that Paul was writing to? Let's look at verses 8 down through 13 right now. And I want you to think about as I read this, okay, what situation was Paul writing to in Rome? First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you because your faith is being reported all over the world. God, whom I serve in my spirit, I'm sorry, let me read that again. God, whom I serve in my spirit in preaching the gospel of his Son, is my witness how constantly I remember you in my prayers at all times. And I pray that now, at last, by God's will, the way may be open for me to come to you. That's just Paul saying basically, hey, never met you guys. I'm excited to meet you guys, and I hope it happens soon. Verse 11, I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I planned many times to come to you, but I've been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might bring a harvest among you, just as I have had among the other Gentiles. All right. This Roman church, the situation there was unique in all of Paul's letters. He didn't plant this church. At the time he wrote this, he'd never been to Rome. And he knew what an important city Rome was. If I can get the gospel there, it's going to spread everywhere throughout the civilized world. But again, Paul didn't plant the church. So he doesn't know the people. He's trying to teach and train them so that their faith, they would have strong enough faith. It's kind of like trying to raise your neighbor's kids. You want them to turn out well, but they're not your kids. They're not yours to scold. They're not yours to mold. But there's another and deeper problem going on here as well. It's a problem in their society, and it affects the people in this church and how they can approach their faith and the gospel itself. Look at verses 14, 15, and 16. I'm obligated both to Greeks and to non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish. That is why I am eager to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome. When he says Greeks and non-Greeks, he means Greeks and Jews. He says, I'm obligated to the people who follow God from the very beginning, and I'm obligated to people who are just discovering God through Jesus Christ. Right? That's why I want to come and preach to you in Rome. people had been separated by their religions. They were Jews and Gentiles, and the Jews are not anxious to have the Gentiles involved in their religion. All right, we'll come to God through Jesus, but these Gentiles, we're not comfortable with that. So the apostles come along, they have their gospel for the Jews, but then they say Gentiles are welcome as well. Okay, but the old prejudice, the old barriers are still there. So now you have a church that has some, get a load of this, you have some Jewish Christians. They've been following God. They know the law of Moses. They know the covenants and the promise. They've been doing that for years. And now you have Gentiles who want to become Christians as well. You also have Jews in that culture who are following the law of Moses, but they want nothing to do with Jesus, and they're kind of looking askance at these other Jews who are following Jesus, and you have Gentiles who aren't following Jesus who wonder why these other Gentiles are involved with these Jews. Whew, this can be a bit of a mess. So Paul writes to address these issues. With all this in mind, with the fact that Paul didn't plant this church, he doesn't know these people, and that this is a very divided society along societal lines and theological lines. Now let's look again at verse 17. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. Remember, he sent his son. We can see what kind of God he's like. A righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Paul writes to address all the issues that I mentioned before. What he says is that the news about Jesus being the way to God teaches us about God's righteousness. That's by faith, from first to last. When he says from first, he's talking about these Jews who trace their heritage back to Abraham. They trace it through Moses, through David, through the prophets. They have the history. They have the covenants. They have the law. They've been there from first to last. Well, guess what the last is? That's the Gentiles. That's the ones who are just now discovering God, just now coming to him. Some of you who are watching this may remember when Abundant Life began under Pastor Sam, like 40 years ago. You have a history here. You've been with it through the years. You've been through the ups and the downs and all that. You've seen changes. You were here all through Pastor Gabe. And some of you may be like me, brand new. As I'm recording this, I have officially now been in Grass Valley for a week. I'm brand new here. But the thing is, we're all bought here because of faith in Jesus Christ. This is what Paul is addressing us here. For you old timers, it's awesome that you've been serving God. For you newcomers, it's awesome that you're here. But this is a blend. We'll talk more about that next time. Until then, have a great day.